So I've been reading a lot recently in the last few years. I wouldn't say a lot, but I've been seeing a lot in the last like 3 to 4 years that like people already know about Fauda, right? But other like Israeli TV shows and some game shows too are being repurposed often on Netflix or American TV and other international TV shows. Is there something going on that Israel is kind of like where, let's say, I would say one of the few places Israel was dramatically underrepresented globally was the cultural influence through TV and movies. Would you say, where do you think Israel stands now when it comes to, let's say, influence in global television and movies, as opposed to where it's been like 5, 10 years ago? Would you say it's dramatically changed? And if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, there's been more Israeli productions in the last 5 or 10 years, but you could say that about any country. I mean, again, with streaming, it really offered a global platform, a global stage for countries across the world. I mean, you saw stuff coming out of South Korea and Turkey, France. So I think, people are really getting a taste of different countries and cultures based on streaming and the internet and things of that nature. The other thing that's maybe a little bit more unique about Israel is that if you look at the history of TV in Israel, it's quite new. For the first like 30 or 40 years of the country, dating back to 1948, you basically only had one or two TV channels in Israel, like in the whole country, and they were government operated or subsidized, I should say. And then in the early 90s, you started having what they call commercial TV, which is private companies having TV channels. And then you had three operators operating one commercial channel, like in 1991 or two. Then that broke off into two, and then three. And even today in Israel, you don't have that many, what they would call in other countries, cable TV channels. I know in the States, for example, when I was growing up, we had like, I don't know, 1,000 channels, or in the hundreds at least. And in Israel, you still only have about 5 to 7, but now you have satellite. And so, you can watch HBO or you can watch whatever. And now you have streaming. So you can, Disney Plus just came to Israel, for example.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I mean, there are some things that, because I think Israel adopted the whole TV industry, commercial TV industry, at least much later than maybe in other countries, especially from the States, that played a part maybe in the recent emergence of Israeli TV and cinema on the world stage. But at the same time, I think a lot of countries are seeing that sort of trend themselves because of the sort of international global trend of streaming.
Right. Do you think that Israel's going to follow the way of, let's say, the American consumer and like a cord cut, so to speak, and just go primarily streaming? Because in my house, what we do, I mean, we had a 65-inch TV, which my wife made me take out of the living room, but it doesn't like we don't pay for any cable or TV or anything. Never in America, never here. It's Netflix. We're watching YouTube and all of that on TV, basically on demand, right? So as opposed to we mean it's more ideological. We don't like other people controlling what comes into our TV. We select what we want to watch. But would you say, and I know that's a growing trend globally in America in particular, would you say that's going that way too? Because I feel like a lot of people are still watching a lot of traditional TV in Israel and less on Netflix and streaming.
Well, I mean, it's a very nuanced question because in general, Israel is part of the world. So any global trend is ultimately going to come to Israel in some form or fashion. But I do think that when you look at something like Netflix, I mean, the joke with Israelis is they really don't like American movies, and they do like some American TV, like Friends or How I Met Your Mother, but a lot of them don't love humor as it comes to life in film and TV. It's not that they don't like it, they just don't relate to it. It's not their culture. And so I think that when you see, like, for example, in the States with cord cutting, that's because there's so much on Netflix that's of relevance to the average American viewer that they say, well, I don't need, my Comcast or my Verizon or whatever your cable provider used to be, because I'm filling the void with Netflix and HBO Max and Disney Plus, etc. In
Right.
Israel, because there's probably like Netflix is very strong in Israel, Disney Plus, I'm sure will be successful here, but I still think that the average Israeli viewer still wants that Israeliness in their TV, and they're not going to
Mhm.
get that on streaming platforms. And so that inclination or that desire might maybe diminish the level of cord cutting that you're talking about, although I still think it will exist here just like any other trend.
What do you think is the best way to understand Israel's culture if you're from abroad? Would you think TV and movies is better than, let's say, music, or would you say news or politics? If one kind of wants to like tap in, do you feel that this cinema or video is the best form?
Definitely. I mean, music is, I would put in the same, has that cultural significance. But the thing with music is you don't have your English subtitles or other
Right.
subtitles.
You just sit there with the lyrics.
Right. So yeah, I mean, news is garbage. I mean, that's why I started
Yeah, news is garbage.
Izzy, like point blank. And I'm not ashamed to say this, but the I don't know if I would call them the gatekeepers, but the organizations that are responsible for disseminating news from Israel to the world, and I'll just call them out so we know who we're talking about: Times of Israel, Jerusalem Post, I-24 News, ILTV. I don't know if it's something specific to them or they're just a product of the news environment, but it's not interesting. And
it's really not. It's really not. It's terrible. I mean, the best place to find Israeli news for me is Twitter.
Yeah,
and I would assume it's
which
probably
is citizen.
universal.
Yeah, that's citizen journalism, right? I mean, that's
right.
It's different. And so, like sometimes I go to Times of Israel's website, and you can probably say the same thing about Haaretz and Jerusalem Post. And it literally looks like the country of Israel is burning down according to their homepage. And yet when I look outside, my apartment here in Tel Aviv, blue skies, light breeze, going to go to the beach later, going to be great, good looking people, good vibes. So I just, I think that, again, I don't think that like the Times of Israel, for example, is trying to, has this master plan to like ruin the image of Israel or whatever. I just think that, at the end of the day, they're running a business and they need to get clicks, and we know what gets clicks, vanity and sort of negative.
It bleeds, it leads.
Exactly. Bleeds, it leads. And so, but I think that for me personally, the kind of standard that I hold myself to and Izzy is like, yes, we're a business and we have investors, and, when you have investors, you have to return investment plus, whatever they invested. But like, there's also I don't know if I'd call it like a moral obligation or a moral standing that I say, this is not just, we don't do every little single thing for business. Like, we also understand that as a media company, we are representing Israel in many ways. And we take that, seriously. We're not the only ones that represent Israel. The government represents Israel, there's organizations, there's these other media companies that I mentioned. But for me, I take it as a responsibility that, we have to do the best possible job to show the full picture, which is the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're not Hasbara. We're not just trying to make Israel look like roses and rainbows. We are trying to show everything, and that includes the bad and the ugly. But my theory, my hypothesis from day one from Izzy was, if you take the full picture of Israel, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the ratio of those three things is not equal, meaning with the good, it's probably 70%, the bad is probably 20%, and the ugly is probably 10%. And that's a ratio that we can live with. And I think, you could apply that.
I think we should be proud. And I think one we should be proud of too. Yeah.
And you can apply that same ratio to a human being, right? There's no perfect, all good human being. There's, probably the average human being is 70% good, 20% bad, and 10% ugly.
You're more generous than me.
So anyway, I think for me, like that was important, because I do believe that, like the Times of Israel is a good example. Like, they were started for the right reasons. They weren't just like, oh, we're a media company. Like David Horowitz, I believe his name is. I don't know him personally, but I read some stuff, and I think he had the right intentions. But then again, because of the news aspect of that product, they probably had to, move in directions that all of a sudden sort of contradict the mission, so to speak. And so, for us, I think the product that we've chosen, which is movies and TV shows, maybe gives us more wiggle room and also allows us to do things that maybe news products can't do.
Right. Yeah. I think also the Times of Israel like reached a bubble. It had a bubble, and so with them, and they don't do any reporting. It's just people on their computer just rewriting news. So there's not like even Haaretz, which is probably worse. They have reporters, right? Israel National News has reporters. Jerusalem Posting has reporters.
Yeah, no, Haaretz is bad because Haaretz became an opinion editorial,
it's an anti-Semitic piece, partly German owned. It's pretty out. I mean, it's like the New York Times, really.
Yeah.
They're out to make money off of global anti-Semites.